Think of like every visionary who ever tried to cure human suffering. I mean, you have the Buddha, Jesus Christ, Karl Marx.
All the heavyweights.
Exactly. But according to this highly controversial 2007 essay we're looking at today, they all failed for the exact same reason.
And it's a completely wild reason.
Yeah, it really is. Because the essay claims they were all too afraid to attack the actual disease. And that disease, according to the author, is your family.
It's just a profound shock to the system to even hear that out loud. I mean,
Right.
we are raised to believe the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
That the family is the ultimate sanctuary.
Totally. It's your safe place.
Yeah. But this theory just flips that foundational belief entirely upside down. It's jarring.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we are digging into this radical text. It's titled The Root Cause of Human Suffering. It was written by Srifeng and translated by Ken Yu.
Yeah, and it is a document that basically looks at the, millennia-long track record of spiritual leaders and socioeconomic revolutionaries and just concludes that they completely missed the mark.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Because on one hand, you have the Buddha seeking spiritual enlightenment to transcend worldly pain, and then you have Marx trying to restructure economic classes to end material suffering.
Right, tackling it from totally different angles.
Exactly. But this essay argues that trying to solve human misery without abolishing the traditional family unit is, well, it's like trying to cure a systemic infection with a Band-Aid.
Yeah. But before we go further, it's critical to frame our mission today for everyone listening.
Oh, definitely. Please do.
We're stepping into a text that presents incredibly unconventional, highly provocative views on the very bedrock of human society. And I want to make it super clear, our goal in this deep dive is not to endorse these viewpoints or validate them or take any sides whatsoever.
Right. We're not advocating for this.
Exactly. We're simply here to impartially dissect the internal logic of this specific essay. We want to map out the mechanisms of the author's argument so you can understand exactly how they arrive at such extreme conclusions.
So let's get into those mechanisms then. Because the premise that the family is the root cause of all suffering, that requires a massive logical leap.
Oh, huge.
I really want to understand the framework here. How do we get from like a group of people sharing a home and raising kids to global universal suffering?
So to bridge that gap, the essay relies on a very specific biological analogy. I want you to imagine human society in its entirety as a single giant living organism.
Okay, I'm with you, like a macro level body.
Right. And every organism is made up of fundamental building blocks. So in the body of human society, this framework defines the traditional family unit as the basic cell.
Okay, I can follow that. If society is the tissue, individual families are the cells making up that tissue.
Exactly. And in medicine, if you want to know why an entire body is failing, you don't just look at the surface. You put the individual cells under a microscope.
Right, you look for the root issue.
Yeah, and this is where the text makes its definitive, uncompromising diagnosis. It argues that if a cell carries a virus, the entire biological system will inevitably become diseased.
Wait, so?
The core claim here is that the traditional family is not a healthy cell. It is a cell infected with a virulent pathogen.
I have to push back on that framing immediately. If you tell someone their family is a virus, the immediate reaction is going to be incredibly defensive.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a virus actively destroys its host. But people view their families as safe havens, It's where you retreat when the world is harsh.
Right, it's your comfort zone.
Exactly. Calling it a virus, it feels like looking at the foundation of a house and declaring it's the reason the roof is leaking. It just doesn't intuitively track.
I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But that defensive reaction is completely natural, and it's actually a crucial part of how this theorized virus operates.
What do you mean?
Well, a virus often evades the immune system by appearing native, right? By feeling like it belongs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The framework asks us to stop looking at how the family feels on the inside and start looking at the external symptoms it produces in the broader societal body. Like, what happens when millions of these family cells interact?
Okay, so what are the symptoms?
The essay points to the relentless, exhausting pursuit of fame and fortune and the underlying mechanics of crime. It says these are the primary symptoms of this infection.
Well, if we're tracing symptoms, let's look at the mechanics of corruption and bribery, which the essay uses as a prime example.
Yeah, that's a really good one to dig into.
Right, because on the surface, if a politician or like a business leader takes a bribe, we usually just chalk that up to individual greed. We say they just have a flawed moral compass.
But this theory argues that greed is a lazy diagnosis. It asks us to dig deeper into the actual why.
Right. Why do they need all that?
Exactly. Why does that person need more money than they could possibly spend on themselves? The mechanism driving that corruption, according to the text, is almost entirely rooted in the family structure.
Because they're hoarding it for their relatives.
Right. It is about providing for a spouse, or securing advantages for children, or, elevating the prestige of the parents. The family creates this incredibly rigid us versus them boundary.
That boundary mechanism is fascinating because it's not just about hoarding wealth for the sake of wealth. It's driven by this, primal fear of marginalization.
Yes, the fear of falling behind.
The text actually highlights that people are terrified of being looked down upon, particularly by their peers and neighbors. And it's not even just about their own ego.
No, it's much deeper than that.
Right. It's the unbearable thought of their kids or their spouse being viewed as lesser than.
Which forces a behavioral loop. To protect the family from that social shame, an individual feels this overwhelming compulsion to ensure their family's standard of living is at least equal to, if not better than, everyone else's.
So it becomes an arms race.
Exactly. The clothes, the housing, the quality of education, all of it becomes a literal arms race.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because an arms race requires endless ammunition, right? The essay sets up this very realistic scenario, what happens when a person's standard salary isn't enough to win that arms race?
Which is the reality for most people.
Right. The pressure to elevate the family doesn't just disappear because the paycheck is small. That pressure is constant.
Yeah, never lets up.
So the text argues this is the exact pressure cooker that forces otherwise decent people into corruption. The frantic rat race of human existence isn't a pursuit of personal joy. It is a forced march to secure resources for the family cell.
It completely reframes human motivation. I mean, the essay poses this brilliant hypothetical to test this.
Oh, the one about having zero dependence.
Yes, imagine an individual with no dependence whatsoever. No parents to care for, no spouse to impress, no children to clothe or educate.
Just totally on their own.
Right. If having a family was entirely removed from the equation, would that individual still be working an 80-hour week, obsessing over promotions, and backstabbing colleagues to buy a luxury vehicle?
You'd think definitely not. I mean, without that localized pressure, you'd cover your basic caloric and shelter needs and then probably just go read a book under a tree.
Exactly. The excessive damaging ambition just disappears when the biological requirement to hoard for the us is removed.
And that excessive ambition has a massive cost.
Oh, a catastrophic cost.
Yeah.
But maybe not the one you'd think.
Right, because you might expect a text like this to focus on the macro-level damage, like industrial pollution, or the depletion of the Earth's natural resources to fuel all this crazy consumption.
Yeah, that would be the standard environmental critique.
But what's remarkable is that the essay explicitly dismisses ecological destruction as merely a secondary side effect.
Which is a bold stance, frankly, considering ecological collapse is usually framed as the ultimate crisis of our time.
It really is. So if the destruction of the planet is just a secondary symptom, what is the primary disease actually doing?
The primary destruction is psychological and social. The real cost of this family-driven resource hoarding is a relentless, inescapable culture of comparison.
Because resources are finite.
Exactly. The family structure mandates competition between people. Your family can only win if another family loses.
And that forced competition leads us to how the essay redefines crime, which is a really vital distinction here.
Right, we have to clarify what Giffornet means by crime.
Yeah, because when the text talks about the crime caused by the family virus, it's not just talking about breaking the penal code. It's not just, bank robbery or car theft.
No, it broadens the definition of crime to encompass everyday emotional violence. This theory explicitly states that the most pervasive crimes are the mental torments and emotional abuses generated by this competitive pressure.
I want to dig into that mechanism a bit. How exactly does providing for your family translate to emotional violence against others?
It basically comes down to loyalty and broken promises. Yeah. When you are operating within a structure that demands you prioritize your localized family unit above literally all else, you will inevitably have to betray the broader community.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like you might make a promise to a friend or commit to a community project, but the moment your child needs something or your spouse demands an upgrade in lifestyle, you will break that promise to the outsider.
You'll just drop them?
You will step on others to ensure your family's survival and dominance. It's unavoidable.
It's structural betrayal. It makes me think about how often we justify terrible behavior by just saying, well, I'm just doing what's best for my family.
We hear that all the time.
All the time. We treat that phrase as this unassailable moral shield. But this essay argues that very instinct is the poison infecting the water supply.
And this framework claims that thousands of years of human history, with all its wars and betrayals and systemic inequalities, prove that this specific cellular unit is a factory for competition and suffering.
But wait, if we're all naturally inclined to hoard resources and betray our neighbors just to elevate our own bloodline, it makes human nature sound inherently malicious, like we are just wired for greed at our core.
That is the intuitive leap most people make.
Yeah.
But this framework argues the exact opposite.
Right.
Yeah, it introduces its most crucial distinction right here. It completely separates human nature from the behavioral output. The virus of competition doesn't come from our DNA, it comes from what the text calls a program.
Like an operating system running in the background?
Precisely. The family is not a biological inevitability in this view, it is an installed operating program. It is a rigid set of rules, expectations, and resource allocation algorithms that we are all slotted into from birth.
It's like having a heavy background application running on your phone that constantly drains the battery and hogs the memory.
That's a great way to put it.
You don't consciously choose to be greedy or competitive, but the Family OS simply requires massive resource allocation just to keep the system running. It forces you to compete for processing power whether you want to or not.
What's fascinating here is how this concept totally absolves the individual.
Right, because it's the software's fault.
Exactly. The theory explains that once a person enters this family program, even the most outstanding, highly moral individuals become infected. You could possess the kindness of a saint, but if you are plugged into an architecture that demands you outcompete your neighbor for resources to feed your children, you will become competitive.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It means that none of the dysfunction we see is actually a personal failure.
None of it.
So if your parents were overly demanding, or your sibling is ruthlessly competitive, or your marriage is fraught with anxiety about money, it's not because your parents or your spouse are bad people. The text explicitly states that none of these conflicts are the fault of the individual.
Right. It places the blame squarely on the structural design.
Hmm?
The essay uses an old saying, every family has its own difficult scripture to recite.
Which usually just means every family has its drama.
Yeah, we usually take that to mean every family has hidden pain. But this framework reinterprets that saying. The scripture is difficult to recite because the language itself is corrupted.
Oh.
If you plug a morally good person into a corrupted system, you are going to get corrupted, suffering-inducing behavior.
Okay, so if we follow this logic to its absolute limit, the family is a flawed operating system actively infecting the hardware of society with a virus that forces us to betray each other for resources.
That's the diagnosis.
That is a very grim diagnosis. But, I mean, you can't just unplug an operating system without bricking the entire computer. How do we uninstall this program without completely destroying the machinery of human existence?
Well, this is where the text transitions from diagnosis to a highly controversial prescription. And to be fair, the author demonstrates a pretty grounded understanding of human psychology here.
In what way?
The essay acknowledges that you cannot simply mandate a forced disbandment of the family.
Right. A government can't just pass a law saying, effective tomorrow, families are illegal, everyone disperse. It would cause instant apocalyptic rebellion.
Oh, absolutely. The psychological tether is way too strong. The text actually compares the idea of willingly disbanding one's family to the idea of a person voluntarily handing over all of their property and wealth to complete strangers.
It goes completely against our ingrained survival programming.
Exactly.
The essay uses an incredibly visceral analogy for this, actually. It says that expecting people to dismantle their existing families on their own is as unimaginable and unrealistic as expecting someone to perform complex surgery on themselves.
It's a perfect metaphor for the author's view. The family is so deeply intertwined with our identity, our security, and our daily function that trying to cut it away feels like taking a scalpel to your own organs.
The pain of the procedure seems worse than the disease.
Exactly.
So we have a total stalemate, then. The text claims that as long as families exist, human suffering is endless and inescapable. But it also admits that forced or voluntary disbandment of existing families is functionally impossible.
Right. It's a bind.
So what is the actual mechanism for change? How do you cure a disease you can't surgically remove?
If self-surgery is off the table, the text proposes what is essentially a generational war of attrition.
A war of attrition.
Yeah. It offers a singular, incredibly rigid solution to stop the replication of the virus. The instruction is simple. Those who are currently unmarried must never get married. and those who are divorced must never remarry.
Wow. So it's a quarantine strategy.
Exactly.
You don't kill the infected cells, you just stop the cells from dividing. You let the current generation of families live out their lifespan, but you prevent any new family programs from being installed.
You starve the virus of new hosts. That's the entire plan.
So what does this all mean when we look at the actual reality of human life? Because if you step back and look at the logistics of this solution, it is a glaring, massive nightmare.
It's incredibly messy.
Yeah. If a global population suddenly stops marrying and forming localized family units, the entire infrastructure of human survival just collapses.
The systemic shock would be profound. And, to give the essay credit, it does not shy away from the gaping holes this creates. It fully admits that implementing this solution triggers a cascade of massive existential logistical problems.
I mean, just think about the sheer mechanics of society. The text itself points out the obvious questions. What happens to human intimacy and sexual relations? How does the species handle reproduction?
Right. Do we even have children?
Exactly. And if we do, who is actually feeding, housing, and educating a newborn baby if the biological parents aren't forming a unit to protect it?
And the logistical nightmare extends to the end of life as well. The essay asks how a society deals with aging, illness, and death.
Because right now, the family is the safety net.
Exactly. Currently, the family acts as the primary safety net for the elderly and the sick. If you delete the family OS, who provides the elder care, how does the basic day-to-day economy operate without the family unit acting as the primary engine of consumption and labor?
It feels like the author is tearing down the only house we have to live in without providing a blueprint for a new one. Or rather, they just point to an empty field and say, well, the ingenuity of civilized people will figure out how to build something better.
It does sound like that.
That is a massive leap of faith to ask of humanity.
It is a massive leap.
Yeah.
But the author doesn't actually leave it entirely to spontaneous human ingenuity. The text introduces a theoretical patch for this deleted operating system.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Almost as a final pitch, the essay mentions a conceptual system and set of values called Life Genuine.
Okay, we need to dig into this. What exactly is Life Genuine supposed to be? Because you can't just drop a word like that and pretend it solves the collapse of the entire social safety net.
Well, based on the logistical gaps the essay identifies, Life Genuine functions as the proposed alternative architecture. If the traditional family is an OS based on private resource hoarding, Life Genuine is presented as an OS based on collective sharing. The theory implies that to answer the questions of childcare, elder care, and economic survival without the family, you must transition to a communal model.
So instead of two parents frantically competing against their neighbors to secure resources for their specific child, Life Genuine would represent a system where the broader community collectively pools resources to raise all children.
Right, and collectively cares for all the elderly.
Precisely. The text claims that by understanding and adopting the values of Life Genuine, humanity will find the specific answers to operating a society without localized families.
It suggests that once the exclusionary us versus them boundary of the family is removed, human ingenuity can finally design systems of mutual care that don't rely on competition and betrayal.
It's essentially saying, I've diagnosed the fatal flaw in your hardware, I've told you to stop manufacturing the defective parts, and by the way, here is the new open-source communal software ready for download.
That's a perfect summary. It is a radical pivot, shifting from a dark diagnosis of millennia of suffering to proposing a completely revolutionized communal structure as the ultimate cure.
It's a staggering journey of logic, honestly. So, to summarize the incredible terrain we've covered today, we started by looking at why historical heavyweights failed to end human misery, only to find a 2007 essay that diagnoses the traditional family unit not as our greatest comfort, but as a corrupted operating program. A program that forces us into relentless resource hoarding, generates the emotional violence of broken promises, and mandates an endless cycle of competition. And the only way out, according to this framework, is a generational quarantine on marriage, paving the way for a completely new collective societal architecture.
And as we wrap up this exploration, it is crucial to reiterate our foundational mission today for you listening. Our purpose in this deep dive was purely analytical. We deconstructed how Zhuofen traces the symptoms of societal competition back to the structure of the family unit, and how that logic demands such an extreme solution. We are mapping the architecture of the argument, not endorsing the abolition of the family or validating the proposed communal systems.
We're just the technicians taking the machine apart to show you how the gears turn. We aren't telling you to drive the car.
Right. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this raises an important question for all of us.
What's up?
Even if you completely reject Su Feng's claim that the family is a virus that must be eradicated, the underlying concept of society operating on invisible programs is incredibly compelling.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes you wonder if the overwhelming urge to compete, to hoard resources, and to measure our worth against our neighbors is influenced by structural programs we simply inherited at birth. What other unquestioned foundational programs of your daily lives are you currently running without even realizing it?
That is the kind of question that fundamentally changes how you view your own decisions. I mean, are we the users making active choices, or are we just executing the code of the software we were born into?
It's definitely something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly complex, paradigm-shifting deep dive today. We hope it challenged your perspectives and gave you an entirely new framework to chew on. Stay insanely curious, keep questioning the invisible structures around you, and we will see you next time.